Good afternoon, everybody. It's Contra Costa Taxpayers Association with our speaker on Proposition 19, which passed in the recent election. We have with us today the probably one of the few experts in the field, David Wolfe, who is consultant from Well-Versed Consulting Incorporated, previously the legislative analyst for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And so at this time, I'll let you know that we thank you for your participation. If we haven't seen you before, glad that you're joining us. CoCoTax is a nonprofit association for taxpayers, and I hope you can stay till the end. And if not, this will be on our YouTube channel at Contra Costa Taxpayers Association within a day or two. And it's also on our website, www.cocotax.org. You can also join our association through that website. So now let me turn this over to our speaker because it's a very complicated topic. He'll also give us a couple of updates of what's going on in Sacramento in the last couple of months, since I know there are some interesting, to be kind, things that are going on. So let me turn it over to David Wolfe. David, thank you so much for being with us.
Sue, no, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, it's so good to be back in front of CoCoTax. Obviously, a lot of you know me during my years at Howard Jarvis when I came down and spoke to the group any number of times. And I've owned my own consulting firm now for 3 years. And one of the things that I worked on most recently among my handful of clients was Proposition 19. But as Sue mentioned, let me just go ahead and gave sort of a similar talk to a local chamber of commerce a couple of weeks ago. Let me just go ahead and do a brief budget overview and focus on a couple of the bills that have been introduced in the legislature. Then we'll delve into talking about Prop 19. I will speak for about 20 minutes. I know this is a lively group by history and having spoken to you guys before, and I'm sure you have lots of questions, which, as Sue mentioned, she did send me some. So I will attempt to preemptively answer your questions. But again, I don't want it necessarily limited to Prop 19. If you have budget questions, if you have legislative questions, if you have political California questions, I'm a jack of all trades and I'm happy to answer anything I can. So with that, let me delve into this presentation. So the Governor Newsom released his January budget couple of weeks ago. This is a $227 billion budget, $164 billion of that comes out of the general fund. In some respects, this budget is fiscally prudent. It includes $15 billion of additional money into the rainy day reserve fund. But again, a lot of that money is coming from federal COVID relief money too. And we don't know if there's going to be a third federal stimulus package in either this month or next month. And that could take further pressure off the state budget and allow them to either spend or waste additional amounts of your tax dollars. So I think it's important to note that the economic damage due to COVID was not as bad as we originally thought it would be. And certainly myself and people that work in politics thought the bottom was going to fall out of the political barrel. And that really hasn't been the case, despite California's relatively high levels of unemployment vis-a-vis the rest of the country. And I think, that's evident in the fact that, general fund spending has only fallen off by about $10 to $15 billion year over year. And we still have a $15 billion reserve. But I think it's highly important that the state be prudent here. According to the governor's estimates, there's going to be an $11 billion shortfall over the next 2 years that's going to have to be addressed. And the Legislative Analyst Office, the nonpartisan group that advises the legislature on fiscal and other matters, actually has that number even a little bit higher. So it is very important that the state be prudent, I think, in their spending. And, it remains to be seen between now and June when the budget actually passes, just how prudent they're going to be. The The governor's requested that the legislature approve $3 billion in immediate emergency budgetary spending. So this would be money that would be approved well before June. That includes $2.4 billion that are going to go towards a $600 stimulus check for those Californians receiving the earned income tax credit. There's 4 million Californians, primarily low-income individuals, who are going to be receiving checks if the legislature approves that piece of the spending. The governor's also requested language be approved to begin the rollout of $2 billion, of an additional $2 billion beyond what's already been spent to reopen schools and engage in in-person learning. And I know as a parent, listen, we all want to get our kids back to in-person school as soon and as safely as it's possible to do so.
Thank you.
The Prop 98 education guarantee is at an all-time high in this budget of $85.8 billion. That's roughly $2 billion higher than it needs to be. And again, there's continuing ongoing issues with COVID. And a lot of the spending in this budget is a reflection of the ongoing issues with COVID. The governor's budget proposes over $700 million in targeted tax credits. That includes a small business loan guarantee program and an additional $300 million in workforce development and job training programs. $500 million will also be allocated for the construction of 7,100 permanent homes, and $1.5 billion of predominantly cap and trade funds will be allocated to building ZEV and energy efficient vehicles, electric, hydrogen, fueling vehicle infrastructure, and providing tax credits to individuals to purchase cars and allow for that infrastructure to be built. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to mince words when it certainly comes to this part of the budget, and legislators have already expressed this in various budget subcommittee hearings. I think there's large portions of this budget that need to be tweaked between now and June. I think not even $1 billion of additional tax credits for small businesses and workforce development programs is dramatically insufficient given the job losses, and some of the other problems that we're seeing in the state right now, vis-a-vis and due to COVID. $500 million for 7,100 permanent homes is a really, really expensive per capita affordable housing cost. 7,100 is a drop in the bucket compared to the additional housing that we need. Some numbers have it that we need to build 180,000 new units of housing per year over the next 10 years just to keep pace with demand. And some people would argue that that number is too high, but regardless, 7,100 permanent homes for $500 million is a drop in the bucket, and more needs to be done to encourage more affordable housing development beyond just throwing money at it, whether that's by right permitting processes that Governor Jerry Brown tried to do before he left office that didn't get done. There's all sorts of permitting issues that need to be addressed, and by right would be one such way to address this. So let me just talk about a couple other things. Assembly Constitutional Amendment 1 has been reintroduced. I think when I was down there last year, or 2 years ago, I spoke on this. Right now, per the Constitution and per Prop 13, it takes a 2/3 vote to approve either local bonds or special taxes, including sales taxes and parcel taxes on the local level. ACA 1, which is a direct threat to Prop 13, would drop this threshold from 2/3 to 55%, thus making it easier to pass local bonds and parcel taxes. That's concerning on a number of different levels. Just taking the parcel taxes into account, and the bonds for that matter. Listen, everyone gets to vote on these things locally, right? But only homeowners pay these bonds and these parcel taxes. Property owners, but primarily homeowners pay these bonds and parcel taxes, right? So anytime you're lowering the threshold, it's going to be a dramatically it's going to lead to dramatically higher property taxes for everyone across the board. ACA 1 has been reintroduced. It was also introduced as ACA 1 2 years ago. And you may recall Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was instrumental in the defeat of ACA 1, kept it from getting 2/3 vote in the state assembly and kept it from going over to the state Senate, and ultimately kept it off the ballot. And, we're obviously, I think any fans of Prop 13 would be desirous to see that result again this year. The dynamics of the legislature have changed, a little bit. In some ways, they haven't changed, right? The Democrats still have a 2/3 supermajority in the legislature. Democrats net picked up 1 seat in the legislature as a result of the November 2020 elections. They net lost 1 seat in the assembly, but Democrats gained 2 seats in the state Senate. And again, a 2/3 supermajority remains in place and will be, ongoing for the foreseeable future. So attacks on Prop 13 are always a threat, and this is something to keep in mind as we go throughout the year and next year also, just to see if there's any movement on this and see, if they're able to get the 2/3 vote. Another bill that's been introduced is Assembly Bill 71. This is a corporate tax increase. It raises the corporate threshold from 8.84% to something close to 10% or even over 10% if you're a financial institution. If you're a business with revenue of over $5 million, and that tax is not just for in-state companies, but also on those businesses not based in California, but they do business within the state. So this is a dramatically huge tax increase. California Chamber of Commerce, CalTax, the California Business Roundtable, NFIB have already opposed AB 71, and as a tax increase, that would require obviously a 2/3 vote of the legislature in order to pass, and obviously it would need to be signed by the governor as well. So that's something to keep in mind also. Speaking of the governor, you may have heard about a potential recall. Increasingly, I think, and not just myself, but Republicans and Democrats on both sides of the aisle seem to think that a recall will be coming to a special election ballot near you at some point this year. They have gathered over 1 million signatures to this point. In order to be safe and account for duplicate signatures, they need to gather roughly 1.5, 1.6 million signatures. There was an individual that just dropped in a $500,000 check to fund this effort. So it seems increasingly likely with 2 months to go that, and nothing else really in competition in terms of gathering signatures, that a potential recall of Governor Newsom will qualify for the ballot. I would caution, and again, I'm coming at this completely nonpartisan, I would caution for those dreaming of recalls and thinking back to 2003 when Gray Davis was recalled, because obviously, listen, California has a history of recalling governors and politicians. Very few states, by the way, have the ability to engage in a recall of this type. California is fairly unique in that. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. But I think it's important to keep in mind that, I don't want to prognosticate on what a potential result of that could be, but this is a dramatically different state politically than what it was like in 2003. And also, I think Democrats will ultimately be more united as a party than they were in 2003. You'll recall the lieutenant governor at that time, Cruz Bustamante, decided to throw his hat in the ring, and it led to a lot of dissension and confusion among Democrats, and I think ultimately helped Gray Davis to get recalled. That was a huge, huge factor in that.
David, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. Yeah. We're starting to get swamped with Prop 19 questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So yeah, I think now's probably a good time to really jump into Prop 19.
No. I'm sorry. I was just going to switch over to that. So let's do that. Okay. No, and I appreciate that. So let's delve into Prop 19. Okay. So just by way of introduction, what Prop 19 actually did. In essence and fundamentally, it did two things, right? For individuals over the age of 55, it allows them to transfer their property tax base to any home anywhere in California up to a maximum of 3 times. Okay, prior to Prop 19, individuals over the age of 55 could transfer their Prop 13 base value, but they could only do it 1 time to a home of equal or lesser value, and they could only do it to 1 of 10 counties. So again, 3 times anywhere in the state, any home, lesser or greater value. Okay, so tremendous flexibility for seniors to transfer their Prop 13 tax base. The measure also limited, this is the other big piece, and it did a bunch of other things, and I'm happy to go into that, but I think just for the sake of time, I'm just gonna focus on the big pieces. The other thing the measure did was limit the inherited transfer provisions of property between parents and children. Prior to Prop 19, parents could transfer their primary residence to their child and up to $1 million of additional property, the assessed valuation of additional property. The child didn't have to live in the home. The child didn't have to live in the state. It was simply a transfer that could be done of a primary residence, and again, up to $1 million of additional property. Prop 19 limited that, and in essence said that the inherited transfer between parents and child, you could keep your tax base, but only if the child lived in the home and made it his or her primary residence. Okay, and they would have 1 year from the date of the transfer, whenever that was, in order to do that. Okay, so that's in essence what Prop 19 did. Let me go ahead and answer the questions Sue sent me, and then I would be happy to take questions and answer questions in the chat and what have you. First of all, Sue mentioned that there's a number about $1 billion inheritance tax being floated around. And let me go ahead and address that. The opponents to Prop 19 continued to bring this up during the campaign, and patently, it's just not true. I mean, I would dispute it on a couple of different levels. First of all, it's not $1 billion. The Legislative Analyst's Office, the nonpartisan organization that writes the nonpartisan ballot information that's placed in your pamphlet, said nothing about $1 billion. They said tens of millions, up to hundreds of millions of dollars of additional revenue for the state. Nowhere in there was there a $1 billion inheritance tax in the ballot pamphlet. I would also argue and dispute that it was a tax increase for the simple reason that, listen, taxes are government exactions that are imposed by government that you do not have a choice with which to pay. I think the gas tax, which we all know was passed a couple of years ago, is a perfect example of that. You have to pay that every time you go to the pump. You do not have a choice. That is not the case with Proposition 19, okay? You will not pay additional property taxes if your child moves into the house. And, if you don't want to pay those taxes, either sell the house or have your child move into it. Or, and this is what I'm encouraging everyone to do that I talk to about Prop 19. Listen, you have until February 16th to transfer your property to your child, and that would continue to abide by current law. So I would recommend that first of all, I would recommend talking to an estate planning attorney about any of this before you take actions. I am not an attorney. I do not draft or do estate documents in any way. So please talk to an estate attorney. And if you haven't lined up that appointment and you do desire to transfer your primary residence to your child, and your child has no plans of living in it, you definitely want to take advantage of this prior to February 16th. So please start lining up those appointments. The assessors are going to be flexible. And, I've talked with them in the weeks and months since the election. They're going to be somewhat flexible with this paperwork. So listen, they're getting deluged with these estate planning documents right now. They're not going to be able to process them all by February 16th. So I think, again, you're going to be largely safe as long as you submit the paperwork to them by February 16th. to include your child within the inheritance. I would also caution you though, and this would be another reason to talk to an estate planning attorney, there are capital gains taxes implications that could happen with this, depending on the size of the property and the nature of the transaction. So again, that would be another reason to talk to someone who's well-versed in estate planning. Let's see, questions from Sue. What's the process for requesting the transfer of tax basis from one's prior primary residence? Okay, I sort of addressed that. I don't think I have anything to add. So the thing is, talk to an estate planning person and try and get that paperwork in as soon as possible. Must the prior primary residence be sold before requesting a transfer? So I'm assuming this is in reference to the property tax portability piece for seniors. So that piece of the measure takes effect April 1st. So the inherited property transfer takes effect February 16th. The property tax portability for the seniors, allowing them to move to any home anywhere in the state up to a maximum of 3 times, takes effect April 1st. Okay. And everything I have heard from the assessors, and I've talked with, again, multiple assessors in multiple counties, I would encourage you to call the Contra Costa. Well, actually, I kind of know how the Contra Costa assessor is going to deal with this. I have heard from a majority of assessors that as long as you sell your current home or buy your new one after April 1st, that you will continue to be able to transfer your Prop 13 base up to a maximum of 3 times. So if you can't wait to do both transactions after April 1st, as long as you wait and do one, so if you were to sell the house, sell your primary residence now and buy a new one after April 1st, it's my understanding you would be covered under the portability provisions and again, be able to move to any county in the state without losing your Prop 13 property tax base. Your property tax, there was a question, what is the property tax base? That's a good question. It's 1% of the price at which you bought your home or business, plus that Prop 13 assessed valuation of 2% a year. So yes, that does include land, improvements to the land, et cetera, and so on and so forth. Again, 1% at which you bought the house plus 2% a year. That number is your Prop 13 base that will transfer. And the last question that Sue had for me here, does the transfer of the tax basis handle different parts of one's tax bill, such as special taxes or assessments, personal taxes, bonds, et cetera? Listen, special taxes and bonds are added in below the line. And again, remember when we talked about ACA 1 earlier, that's an important point to bring up when talking about lowering the threshold for local bonds and parcel taxes, is those are not included in Prop 13's 2% cap. They're added in above and beyond. That's why when you go back and look at your property tax bill, and I'd encourage you to do this if you have time, you'll see a property tax basis on there of 1.2 or 1.3%. That extra 0.2 or 0.3% is all those local bonds and parcel taxes that voters have passed in your communities. So, I mean, all that to say, they're added in below the line. They're not included in that 1% plus 2% a year. And as a result, they're not part of your property tax base per Proposition 19. All that's included is that base value. It does not include bonds and special taxes. So with that, listen, I still did it all in 20 minutes.
Oh, you have not begun to hit the questions yet.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
And
some of these you've kind of touched on, but people need a little more information and specificity. Several people have asked, does Proposition 19 override a living trust?
Yeah, and Sue, I'm looking at these questions too. So I mean, I can just
okay.
I can go down in order.
Okay.
I mean, does it override a living trust? And the answer is no, it does not. It does not override a living trust. It has nothing to do with trusts, actually. If you have a trust, Prop 19 doesn't impact it. And you can continue to engage engage in that as you will.
But David, I think the clarification that's requested is, if someone leaves a home to their child in a trust and they do not move in within a year, then will the property be reassessed at the current value, effectively raising their property tax base?
Yes, it will. Every assessor I have talked to has said that will be the case.
Okay. And further on down, you're going to have a question about, does it affect the step up in basis?
Okay. Okay, let me, and Sue, I get that. Let me take these in order. So Linda, you asked a question. Under Prop 19, can you exchange if primary residence sold in January 2021, but a new property was purchased in November 2020? And so I'm assuming, again, you're talking about property tax portability and you're a senior over the age of 55. I'm going to assume that that's the case. And the answer is, if you haven't done a property tax transfer yet, under previous law, you can still do one transfer, right? As long as it's in county or to one of those 10 other counties, you can still transfer your property tax base as long as it's to a home of equal or lesser value. So if it was, you can still transfer that base, but under the scenario you described, no, that's not eligible for Prop 19. Team Townsend asked a question: if I buy my parents' primary residence before February 16th, can I keep the Prop 13 tax base? And can my parents use Prop 60 to buy a new primary residence? And I sort of answered that already. The answer to the first part of the question is yes, you can keep your Prop 13 tax base. Just make sure you, again, talk to an estate planning expert and get that paperwork into the assessor's office. And your parents can use, if they haven't done their Prop 6090 transfer and they're continuing to stay in Contra Costa County or wherever county they're at, yeah, they can continue to use Prop 60, or they can wait until after April 1st to buy their new house. And that should also work fine, but they would need to wait until after April 1st to purchase the new property. I hope that makes sense. And by the way, guys, let me give you my email address too. So if you do have further questions, I would be happy to answer them. And I'll maybe see, you can put it in the chat too. It's dwolfe@wellversedconsulting.com. Happy to answer further questions if I don't get to them, or if you have follow-up questions. Let's see here. Yeah, P. Boyd, your answer to Lydia was correct. Let's see. Are you familiar with, or can you comment on Revocable Grantor Gift Trust?
David, could you read Paul Bleeg's advice or comment? Not everybody reads the chats, and for our people that will be watching the video later.
So okay, I'll just dictate this a little bit more carefully. So P. Boyd responded, Lydia, I don't know as much as the speaker, but a living trust should not avoid Prop 19. If your house passes from the living trust to your kids after February 15th, it's a new assessment. And that is correct, which is why, again, if you want your child to inherit the property and they have no plans on living in it, that really does need to happen before February 16th. I can't stress enough just how important that is. Let's see. Yeah, Larry and Randy made a comment. Be careful referring to step up in tax cost basis and capital gains laws, because Prop 13 and Prop 19 have nothing to do with separate income tax and capital gains systems. The correct language would be county reassessment on real property. Prop 19 does not change capital gains treatment as far as I'm aware, and that is correct. And again, that's another reason, as I stressed a few minutes ago, why you would want to talk to an estate planning expert because transferring your property to your kids could result in a capital gains tax increase, depending on a number of different factors that I'm not an expert in, but an estate planning person would be. Brad McCullough writes, since Democrats have a supermajority but are not getting ACA 1 passed, it seems that it's not a Democratic issue. It's more a liberal agenda item, or is it a pro-taxing versus reasonable taxing issue? Brad, Prop 19 remains, and everybody, Prop 13 remains incredibly popular with the voting electorate. Public Policy Institute of California, which is certainly not a conservative polling institution, has Prop 13 with well over 60% support, even 40 years after it was approved. The only state that doesn't have the only region in the state that doesn't have Prop 13 support is in the San Francisco Bay Area. But in every other part of the state, including Los Angeles, it's got majority vote approval. And I think we saw the importance of Prop 13 with split roll. Prop 15 on the last November ballot, losing somewhat close, but still, lost by 800,000 votes and 5 percentage points, despite the largest Democrat turnout in a generation. So I think that speaks to, the importance of Prop 13 and how it continues to drive public policy. So yeah, I would say it's not a liberal, Democrat, Republican issue as much as it is, people really value Prop 13's protections, and they want to see them continue. And I think that message has gotten through to the legislature also. Bob Brown writes, will the 2022 elections be based on the redrawn districts? And that answer is yes. The redistricting commission has been formed, and they are now beginning the process of redrawing the lines based on the next census. So that those will take effect for the 2022 elections and will be in place for the next 10 years. By the way, it does look like California will lose at least one congressional seat as a result of that census. It is the first time in California's 170-year history that we will have lost a census seat, lost a congressional seat due to the census. So that's pretty stunning right there. Also, we had our slowest rate of growth in our state's history. Last year, I think 0.2%, like 20,000 people, population increase. So yeah, things are trending in the wrong direction in that way, all over the place. Let's see. Let's see. Okay. I'm trying to sift out the questions from the comments. And Patty's iPad writes, what if the inherited residence is a 3-unit building with 1 unit being the primary residence? Can previous property tax base remain the same? So again, you have until February 16th to transfer your property to your children. If you don't do that, and if the child decides to live in the home, or in this case, the apartment, 1 unit, the 1 unit that the individual is living in would retain the market valuation, but the remainder of the market valuation of the complex would not. So again, partial transfer in the event of a condo or an apartment unit and a child living in it, if it was previously held by the parents. So hope that makes sense. Can you transfer rental property to a child and continue to receive rental income? Nothing in Prop 19 prohibits an individual from transferring rental property to their kids. Okay, you can do that now. You can do that 5 years from now. Nothing prohibits property from staying in families as a result of Prop 19. It's just that if you want to retain the parent's property tax base, that rental property needs to be transferred as a part of the current $1 million exemption before February 16th. If it is not, and it's not a primary residence, that rental property will be reassessed at market value within 1 year of the transfer happening per the provisions of Prop 19. I recently read Prop 19 rules that on inheritance, the property must be revalued and taxes assessed accordingly. However, there's an exception for children who have been living in the family home for at least 1 year before they inherit. So yeah, no, that's not accurate. The child doesn't have to live in the house for at least 1 year before they inherit. Again, they can inherit now. Again, before February 16th, they can inherit now. They don't need to be living in the house. So I hope that clarification makes sense. Let's see. What if a home is in a trust? iPhone asks this question. What if a home is in a trust with 2 children and only one child will move into the home as a primary resident? This is open to some discussion. And again, there are at least 19 different issues that are going to have to be interpreted in statute by the legislature to provide some additional clarification and guidance. So keep that in mind too. This is going to be an ongoing discussion throughout at least this year, as we all try and figure out how Prop 19 is going to be implemented. But it's my understanding that as long as one child moves into the house and makes it their primary residence, again, if they do it after February 16th, as long as one child moves in the house and makes it their primary residence, they'd be able to keep the tax base regardless of the number of kids in the trust. But one child would again have to physically move in the house and make it their primary residence. And again, they would be required to take the homeowners exemption also as evidence that they are in fact living in the house. So that's another point that I forgot to mention earlier. Let's see. Kelly asks, can you transfer your property tax base if you convert your primary residence to a rental or purchase a new property? I sort of answered that question already. If your parents are living in the home as a primary residence and they, and they die, again, you have 1 year from the date of that transfer to move in the house. You can make it a rental and not claim the homeowner's exemption, but you will pay market value property taxes on that home if you fail to move in after a year. Let's see, Team Townsend, how do you evaluate it keeping a Prop 13 on a property that is gifted before February 16th versus the value of a step up on the same property that would be inherited after February 16th? Let's see. How do you evaluate it keeping a Prop 13? Okay. Trying to understand this question. Where's the value of a step up? Okay, well, I guess how I would answer this question is the Prop 13 value doesn't change. Just because the property is reassessed to market value, it's still under Prop 13. It still retains that 1% cap plus 2% a year. Prop 13 remains in the Constitution. Prop 19 does nothing to change that. And again, I don't know if that answers that question. I'm having a hard time sort of deciphering that. Let's see. T.S. Gandhi writes, will putting the home into an irrevocable trust before February 16th preserve the property base as well as allow the step up in basis? As I said earlier, I don't believe the simple fact of just putting the home in an irrevocable trust will be sufficient to keep it from being reassessed. But again, that's another reason for why you would want to talk to an estate planning expert, again, sooner rather than later. Mary privately sent me a question. If a Prop 6090 transaction occurred with a purchase closing 2/8/21, Are there 3 moves still allowed under Prop 19? Mary, that is an excellent question. And the answer is some of that is going to have to be determined by the legislature in the implementation process. Again, all I can base this off of is the handful of assessors' offices that I have talked to. I would encourage you for questions like this and other questions to talk to your county assessor as well. But every county assessor that I have spoke to have said that, let's say you hadn't used your one Prop 6090 transaction before Prop 19 passed. If you hadn't used that and you wanted to use it on February 8th, you could. Now, the assessors have said that in all likelihood, there will be 3 additional moves allowed after April 1st. So it's not like, and again, that's still a question open for debate. There is some discussion about that among the assessors, but it looks as though if you hadn't used your exemption, you could use it on February 8th. And then you would get 3 more as long as you moved after April 1st under the provisions of Prop 19. I hope that makes sense. Sonia asks, if the investment property is under a living trust, will the property be reassessed if it is inherited via a trust? And again, that's a question to talk to an estate planning attorney about. But again, just the fact that it is in a trust does not preclude it being reassessed. And that's where those inherited property transfers, and getting that property legally transferred over to your child before February 16th, especially if they don't decide to live in the house, is incredibly important. Trying to lightning round these as quickly as possible. Margaret asks if the transfer property to child prior to February 16th, then the mortgage interest would no longer be eligible for deduction on an income tax filing. No, Margaret, the income tax deduction for mortgages has nothing to do with Prop 19. Whether you live in the house or not, or whether your kids live in the house or not, you can still deduct that mortgage interest on your taxes. Prop 19 has nothing to do with that. That would be the same process as you would do under current law. And again, that would probably be something to talk to your CPA about if you have any additional questions about that. Is there any retroactivity allowing for portability of property tax? If you purchased a new home in January 2021, sold a primary home in November 2020. That question was addressed earlier, and Linda, you asked that question. I think I answered that already. So if I didn't, write another question. My email address hopefully is in the comments. Mark asks, please show the math. Say I sell my home with a low base and buy a more expensive home with a higher base. How does that calculate? And Mark, there is a calculation for that. I should have pulled that up. Maybe I can go back to the frequently asked questions document I put together and answer that question. You know what, Sue, why don't we do this? Why don't I grab a drink of water real quick? Because I'm like dying over here. I don't know if you have anything you want to pass along to the membership, but let's take a 1-minute break and I'll be right back.
You go right ahead. In the meantime, I hope everybody's getting a lot of information. I'm actually getting some additional questions by email and text at the same time. So there's a lot of confusion and questions, and a lot of this is going to depend on estate planning and involving your personal circumstances on inheritance and when to transfer properties and when not to. David, I think you're doing a great job. I'll let you take another minute to kind of scan the questions that have come in on the chat.
Okay, so I found the answer to that question. And
okay, it's all yours.
So good stalling, and I want to be receptive to everyone's time. I know this is supposed to end at 1. So you guys are asking some excellent questions. So you can, under Prop 19, again, transfer your Prop 13 tax base to a home of greater value. Under Prop 19, though, only a portion of that property tax base transfers. So your new Prop 13, your new taxable value, if you purchase a home of greater value, is the prior home's taxable value plus the difference between the new home and the prior home's market value. So again, your taxable value is that 1% plus 2% a year. So the home you're living in now, that would be your prior home's taxable value. And then you add to that the difference between your current home, between your new home's market value and your current home's market value. So for example, if you had an existing home with a taxable value of $200,000 and you sold it for $600,000, and then you bought a new home for $700,000, the new home's tax base would be $300,000. And how we get to that is we take $700,000 minus $600,000, which is the difference between the market values of the homes, plus the original home's assessed valuation, which is $200,000. And that's how you get $300,000. And I want to stress that this is still, even though it's not, the same property tax base if you bought a home of lesser value, $300,000 tax base is a far cry better than the market valuation tax base, which would be $700,000. You're still saving $4,000 a year every year on an ongoing basis on your property taxes with that upward portability. So I hope that answer makes sense. Let me pop open this. So yeah, Mark, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, I'd be happy to email you the math on that. Doris asked to clarify the living trust and child moving in or not in the future. I sort of did that. Let's see. Team Townsend again, if I buy my parents' primary residence before February 16th, can I keep the Prop 13 tax base? And can my parents use Prop 60 to buy a new primary residence? And the answer is, again, talk to an estate planning attorney. But the answer is yes, as long as your parents haven't used their existing Prop 60 or Prop 90 exemption. And again, that restricts them to a home of lesser value, and they have to stay in the same county or one of 10 other counties. So again, they are restricted with where they can move and to what home they can move to. But yes, Team Townsend, they can absolutely do that under those provisions if they can't wait until April 1st. Let's see. Sue asks, can a senior do one of those transactions before April 1st? And the answer is yes. They have the ability to do one property tax portability transfer if they haven't done one already. But again, it's under those existing restraints. A home of lesser value, they can only move to one of 10 counties. And yeah, and so yeah, that's it. As long as you keep it to that. Let's see. Yeah, Larry and Andy makes a good point about the capital gains taxes again, which is why, again, you want to talk to an estate planning attorney. There may be a hit there. There may not be a hit there. It depends on a number of different factors. Let's see. Sue asks, before February 16th, could a transfer to a child be a change in full ownership or joint tenancy? Prop 19 does not speak to that, Sue. And then can I speak to the family farm exemption? So the family farm exemption works the same as the family home exemption, with the exception that under a provision in Prop 19, you are able to keep $1 million of taxable value on the family farm. So in essence, for family farms, it's the exact same thing as it was before Prop 19 passes. If there's a primary residence on a family farm, the child can move in there and continue to pay the same low property tax base, and then they get $1 million of additional tax benefit on the land. because they're in a family farm. It's an open question if you are a family farmer. And again, the definition of family farm is broad. Basically, if you grow anything, and I mean absolutely anything, you are eligible for the family farm exemption here. But it's still a matter of discussion whether it's $1 million of tax exemption for the entire farm or whether it's $1 million per parcel on the family farm. So you do get a benefit, but the amount of that benefit remains open to legislative interpretation and needs to be discussed. And I'm talking with California Farm Bureau quite often about that particular question, let me tell you. Let's see. So you ask another question, if I buy a home after April 1st, but I plan to sell my current home over the summer, do I retain the same tax base on both locations? So, yeah, you know, I would sue to make that process easier for the assessor. And this might be something you want to talk to the assessor about. I would always advise selling your previous home first, you know, and buying another one concurrently. Although you do have 2 years under current law to buy a home after you sell your other one, and continue to be able to carry forward your Prop 13 tax base. So yeah, I mean, you can retain the same tax base on both locations, but eventually the assessor is going to come to you and ask, where's your homeowner's exemption? What home are you actually claiming as your primary residence? So eventually they probably will come back and ask you that. Colleen Britton, hi Colleen, it's good to see you and hear you here in this chat. Been a long time, especially with COVID. Specifically, what documents need to be filed with whom to transfer the primary residence prior to February 16th? That's a good question, Colleen. I'm not privy to the actual names of the forms, and they differ from county to county. So again, that would be another reason to talk to an estate planning expert or your county assessor or both. Brad, do you think Prop 19 is better or worse for Californians on the long-term Prop 13 benefits? Listen, I held, which is why I started working on Prop 19 and continue to believe in it strongly, that Prop 19 expands the benefits of Prop 13 for the simple reason that, again, you can move up to 3 times to any home anywhere in the state. Tremendous flexibility for 9 million California residents who are eligible for these protections. I do believe that expands Prop 13's benefits and tax savings, and that alone makes it worthy of support. And as a result, yes, I do think it is ultimately better for Californians. And I think, wow, I reached the end of the chat with 2 minutes to spare.
Very good. Yeah, you can take a breath for a moment. And David, I'll let you put in a pitch for your business if you'd like. You can take a minute for that. And in the meantime, I'm going to remind people that if they're not a member of the Contra Costa Taxpayers Association, they should be. And they can do that through our website, www.cocotax.org. Also, CoCoTax.com will get you to the same place. Click on membership. You can see our most recent newsletters and some very good information. Join with us because we got to stick together if we're going to keep reasonable taxation in this county. So David, would you like to give a pitch to your business?
Yeah, Sue, I would. No, and thank you for that. So again, the business is Wellversed Consulting, wellversedconsulting.com. I run it along with my wife who does marketing and website design and PR for a number of different entities. But the government affairs wing, I do a lot of lobbying for primarily Sacramento-based clients. However, I am open and gladly willing to help individual Californians, bring their needs and concerns to legislative members. I have, broad relationships on both sides of the aisle, and I actually helped a small group of people move a bill through the legislative process 4 years ago regarding what the definition of massage is in order to help encourage and strengthen their small businesses. and was able to get that through. And that was, again, just a complete grassroots effort that I was able to muscle through the legislature. And I mean, I'm happy to talk more about that offline for anyone who's interested in learning the ins and outs of, of massage and various healing arts issues. But I dabble in all sorts of different areas. And again, if you have a concern to bring before the legislature, I'd love to be able to help you out and do so at very reasonable rates. So.
Sorry. Thank you so much, David. We'll wrap up now. I will remind everybody that on February 12th, we'll be hearing from our speaker, Joe Nation, Stanford University pension tracker. And until then, I'm going to wish you all and hope you are all safe, be happy, and be well versed. Thanks for all tuning in, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, everyone.
On YouTube and our website in a couple of days.